Ahmad Shah Mohibi is the president of Rise to Peace, and he's a former state and defence advisor in Afghanistan and joins me now. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We know that the ongoing humanitarian crisis is affecting the whole country. There's been the erosion of women's rights in Afghanistan. We know that not one country has given the country diplomatic recognition. I mean, how badly has the country deteriorated in the last 2 years?
It has gotten worse. It's 2 years, millions of Afghans are suffering, 500,000, 20 million living in starvation and acute hunger, living below the 50 cents a day. The Afghans across the world, the diaspora, looking for ways to be able to get passports and all sort of documentations. They have a lot of logistical problems, documentations-wise. In terms of terrorism, Taliban could not be able to cut ties. We could see increasing Daesh, increasing ISIS-K and other attacks on minorities in Afghanistan. And when we look at it, the whole situation on girls and education ban of work, I just want to say it's denying girls access to education and suppressing women's rights, as seen in the Taliban's policy, is a grave violation of fundamental human rights and a backward step for any society. So empowering women and providing education for all essential for peace, progress, stability, and the well-being of any nations. I think to this day, Taliban hasn't shown any of those signs. Whenever there's questions about them, the Taliban just neglect to answer, or they just keep saying Sharia law. But I don't think Sharia law in real definition stops women from education. So we see a conglomerate of problems. There is a political rift among the Taliban. There is a lot of issues in terms of the world being silent in the Taliban, no recognition, issues that are impacting the Afghan diaspora across the world and Afghans stuck in Afghanistan, and the Taliban target assassination of former Afghan security forces. So there's a ton of issues going on right now in Afghanistan. But what's happening, the Taliban has this propaganda of we have built this society in Afghanistan. But to give some credit to the Taliban, they have started this municipality cleaning of cities, which have been astonishing compared to the last 20 years of Afghanistan. But that is to not confuse the Taliban services to people with their ideology and what they're doing to the Afghan women, Afghan girls, and freedom of the press. So that's the reality what's happening in Afghanistan.
And if isolation from the international community isn't working in regards to people's rights and freedom of expression, should they try another tack? I mean, Tobias Ellwood, British politician, former soldier, he went to Afghanistan. He came back and said the country has changed and we should be re-engaging with the Taliban. Now, he was widely criticised for that. People said he had had the wool pulled over his eyes. But should perhaps the international community re-engage?
The world should not be fooled by the Taliban targeted videos and campaigns of targeting the Western world. I think that should be the clear message that what the Taliban are doing, if you're being nice to the Western reporters, journalists, YouTubers, if you look at it, videos on social media, Taliban are just allowing these people come to Bandi Amir for vacation, for YouTube. That is what they're trying to do. Is it goes back to several years ago, Anas Haqqani wrote an op-ed to the Western world, and it was published on New York Times. The whole point of that article was to brainwash the Western world. So Afghans and diaspora, they understand the Taliban has never changed. They're the same people. And I think that whole criticism of that journalist, it also speaks the fact that how much the Taliban propaganda has been working on the Western world. They're the same people, 1990s, they killed women, they shot on their head. Right now, they're banned girls from education. So I just want to say, the world should not be fooled by the Taliban's cleaning cities and just having security. I mean, if you think of it this way, Kabul and Afghanistan is secure right now because Taliban are not fighting any longer. So they're back in power. Why people should get, confuse that with their ideology? So I think the world, before the recognition, needs to understand and have the pros and cons of the Taliban and balance everything out and look into whether they should recognize them or not. But I think in going the whole how to approach with the Taliban, what should work with them is they have to negotiate like the Taliban. They have to work like the Taliban, meaning that in the whole Afghan peace process, the world was losing the Taliban. They were waning. And because their approach, their techniques, their military, and how they were responding in the field and the trenches and how they were talking in Doha, it all worked out in their favor. It's the world that losing. It's the world that are just giving more and more to the Taliban. There has to be a period and a stop sign for the Taliban wrongdoings, for the Taliban not fulfilling their promise in terms of women's rights, education, democracy, they have to deliver in action. And I just want to say the diplomacy is key in Afghanistan. I understand people are tired of bullets, but at the same time, Taliban has to be kept accountable, and they have to work with other societies. They will only do that if the world put pressure on the Taliban, and if the world do not get deceived by the Taliban's method of narratives targeting Western world, that they are changed. Trust me, they haven't changed.
Understood, Ahmad. And very briefly, given what you've said, could Afghans themselves then put more pressure on the Taliban in response, in regards to restoring human rights?
Gradual change takes time. What Afghans are doing is what they should do: continue to share videos, continue to speak against the tyranny and brutality of the Taliban, and speak about inclusiveness. It speaks about freedom, and it speaks about that they are not willing to lose the rights as a human being, the rights that they have. They don't want to go backward towards the step of any society. I think that's what Afghan needs to do. In terms of political leadership, they need to understand that past 40 years, the political trajectory of Afghanistan, the whole political dynamic of Afghanistan didn't work out in their favor. So war is not the solution, bullets are not the solution, diplomacy is the key, and they have to provide inclusive policies. They have to work together. I think that is key for Afghanistan. If the past 20 years, people blame the United States for failing Afghanistan, but I think as the Afghan leadership need to take the blame, that they couldn't compromise, they couldn't work in a unity government, they couldn't build institutions. There was $2.1 trillion in Afghanistan, they couldn't utilize it. So it's a loss for Afghanistan, and they have to learn from this mistake, and they have to work with their society. If the Taliban wants to work with others, they have to work with them. Because the past 40 years, war has taken a lot of innocent lives, and it's not the solution anymore. I didn't see resistance, I didn't see bullets, I didn't see young kids being killed in the Hindu Kush Mountains. I only see solution in peace, compromise, and being able to make one unity Afghanistan. I think that is it. And Afghan leaders should learn from the mistakes and should stop blaming the world for their own mistakes and not being able to build a sustainable and peaceful Afghanistan.
Ahmed, we thank you very much. Good to talk to you today. Ahmad Shah Mohibi there, former defense advisor in Afghanistan.